All right.
Yeah, I'll stick around for a few minutes.
Okay. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was pretty rough, but it was like well worth it. I'm so glad I did it.
I'm impressed.
I have hi everybody out there. Thanks for logging on. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to get started. We're just going to be chit-chatting here. So we'll get started about secondaries in a couple minutes. I have a couple really bad blisters from the rope, but other than that, I fared pretty well.
Good.
Hey everyone, thanks for hopping in. We'll get started in just a minute. I'll give it a little bit more time for people to hop on. Can you see my screen, Harvey?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, let's get started. I know it's late on the East Coast, so I think let's try to get this show on the road tonight. So tonight we are going to be talking about secondaries. So hopefully everybody, this will be applicable to everybody. And if you haven't submitted your application, we will definitely get you well aware of what secondaries are and to prepare for when you do. So without further ado, I'm Dr. Renee Marinelli. I'm the Director of Advising with Med School Coach, and I'm joined by my colleague and great friend, Dr. Harvey Katzen, who is also one of the advising directors at Med School Coach. Together, we've probably reviewed a few thousand medical student applications and really have worked with tons of students and enjoy helping people. And so tonight we want to give you some really good information about secondaries. Harvey, you want to say a quick hello?
Sure. As Dr. Marinelli said, I'm Harvey Katzen. I am an oncologist hematologist and was on the admissions committee at George Washington University for many years, and welcome all of you to join us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's get started. Let's kick this off. Let me go to this slide. And so before we start talking about secondary applications, I just want to remind everybody about a couple things is that we're going to be dropping a lot of important links into the chat. So definitely check that out and click on those links, save them. If you're not going to use them now, they will come in handy later. Feel free to pop some questions as they go along into the Q&A. We'll save the last 20 or so minutes of the presentation for an open Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And the other thing too is, there's a lot of details here about secondaries and interviews and what's going to come next, but we won't have time for everything. Unfortunately, we'll try to get to a lot of it and cover the main details, but we are here for you. You can always talk to us at another time. We are definitely here to help with you as you go through your medical school journey. So let's kick this off. So before we talk about secondaries, I just want to do a quick poll. So this is for people that are actively applying this year. So how many schools have you applied to? And so this is through the primary application through AMCAS or AOCOMAS, TMDSAS, or how many do you plan to apply to? All right, give it a couple more seconds here. Great. So let me go ahead and share these. I think this is pretty great. This is a lot of people have applied to over 25. Some people are kind of in the middle and a little bit lower on some ends here, but 25 plus schools seems like a lot, but that is a good range to be in if you're applying to medical school, and we will discuss why in just a couple minutes. So what are secondary applications? So let's just talk about the basics. So secondary applications are applications that you're going to receive after you submit the primary from each individual school you apply to. Some schools will screen for secondaries, meaning if you do not have a certain GPA or MCAT or meet other threshold criteria, then they do not send you a secondary. However, most schools send secondaries. So I usually say you can usually expect to receive about 95% of secondaries from those schools you apply to in your primary application. So what is a secondary? A secondary is that secondary application, as I mentioned, but what it is in like essence is that it's a series of essay questions or additional questions to your primary application that are specific to each school. And they also ask you to pay a fee with it as well. So it's kind of like a further expression of your interest in that school by paying the fee and having your application go to the next level of review. And then they're also taking the time to learn a little bit more about you. So one of the most important things you can really do is start preparing your secondary. So if you have submitted your application at this point, I would encourage you to start getting those ready and typing them and reviewing the prompts from last year and getting them ready. And Harvey, I'll let you talk a little bit about why that's so important.
As Dr. Marinelli was saying, once the season is open and the primary applications have been transmitted to the actual schools, the secondaries are going to come flooding into your mailbox, 5, even 10 or more in a day. As a former medical school admissions officer, I just want to point out that we really date everything. The medical schools know when they sent you the application and they know when you sent it back. So timing is important, because if you took a very long time to send the application back, you might be indicating to the school that maybe that you're not so interested in that school, as opposed to if you respond more rapidly. And that's why, as the link I think takes you to, that it's a very good idea to prepare them in advance. The link that Dr. Marinelli has shared, for the most part, has the secondary application essays from the last several years. And pretty much a rule of thumb is, if the secondary application essay questions have changed in the last few years, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to change all or even any of them. Whereas if you see that it hasn't changed in many years, it's a possibility that it might change. And strategically, maybe that would be one you wouldn't pre-write. But I definitely, certainly very strongly agree with Dr. Marinelli. You want to begin to prepare the essays now, so that you're in a position to return them fairly rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so exactly as Dr. Katzen said, I mean, it really just depends. So with AMCAS, and we're going to talk mostly about AMCAS application and the MD schools tonight, but a lot of this applies to if you apply to osteopathic schools or Texas applications. So AMCAS, when you submit your application for the primary, it takes maybe a couple days to up to a few weeks for them to actually process it and verify it. And then once they do process it and verify it, then they send it to every school you apply to. However, if it's already verified right now, they don't send a verified application to medical schools until June 25th, I believe it's this year. And so you may have submitted like a week or so ago and haven't gotten any secondaries. And that's because AMCAS hasn't released it to the schools yet. So when they actually release it, as Dr. Katzen said, you're going to start getting these secondary requests pouring in. One week you may get 1 secondary request, and the next week you could get 10. And the bottom line is that it can become overwhelming very, very fast if you're getting 10, 15, 20 secondary essay requests in a week or so, and you're trying to type and work through all of these essays and get these secondaries returned within a week or so. that can be almost near impossible. So that's really why we recommend preparing these essays. And most of the time, like Dr. Katzen said, the prompts don't change much. So as I dropped in the chat function, definitely check out our Med School Explorer. This is a website free to use. It has a link for every school, and it gives information about the school. It gives a bunch of statistics about the school. And then it also gives a link to those old secondary prompts so that you can start preparing those right now. And when you start receiving them at the end of this month or so, then you can actually get those turned in really, really quickly. So let's move on and talk a little bit more about like how you want to start preparing the secondaries. So one thing that we see in secondaries and what is really common is that you're going to start clicking through different schools and you're going to see a lot of the similar prompts coming through. So meaning school X may ask something really similar to school Y. And so what you can kind of do is start preparing those prompts. And then I call it recycling those prompts and your answers to fit the next school. So some of the really common ones are, why do you want to come to this school? What diversity will you add to the class? Describe a challenge that you've overcome, or is there anything in addition to what you put in your primary that you want to share in your secondary application? Dr. Katzen, would you talk a little bit more about like how students should approach a couple of these questions, because these ones are so common. We get a ton of questions, and I think it'd be helpful just to kind of have an idea of how to generally approach these ones.
Sure. Let me start with, why do you want to come to school X? This is one where an admissions officer, admissions committee, when they read that, they want to read something that's not a cookie cutter one that you copy and paste it from the last 20 schools. You know, I hear it's a great school, you get good residency positions. Prove you know something about it, that school. You know, you did your homework. It could be something such as the schools in the DC, Maryland area. You're near NIH, you have the opportunity to rotate there. George Washington is very proud of their public health school, and students are able to rotate and actually do internships at the White House or in Congress. You know, maybe in an inner city hospital or Chicago hospital, you might talk about the ability to see a lot of trauma, emergency medicine. The same as University of Maryland, just because it's local, I know it's a level 1 trauma center. And you have to realize that things like that apply to multi-specialties. It's not just surgery and orthopedics. Those unfortunate individuals get infected. There's infectious disease, there are cardiac problems. But the more you can exhibit knowledge, maybe you've done some research in leukemia, and you look at read the bios of the people in the oncology department and say, gee, I'd love to continue working on leukemia with Dr. ABC. Maybe it's a school that is a rural school, and you know, some of your goals, some of your ambitions parallel that. Let them know you know something very specific about that school, as opposed to, like I said, a cookie cutter type of thing. Some of the diversity issues, you know, many people have immigrated from another country. What challenges have you had because of that, be it language, financial, involving yourself with other groups of people? Obviously that doesn't apply to everybody, but those are just a couple of ideas. Are there challenges? And challenges could come in many ways, either something that you'd want to discuss, either a personal or a family health problem, a financial problem. How did you overcome maybe a poor grade, a poor MCAT, to prove or even an interaction with a principal investigator or a team member? All of those challenges that you could turn into growth and persistence are things that are really looked upon very favorably by admissions officers, admissions committees. I'll turn it back to Dr. Marinelli.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. And I totally agree. And, you know, one thing just to piggyback off of what you were saying, Dr. Katzen, is, you know, for that question of why do you want to go to the school? You know, I always get this question of like, how many things should I choose? And most of the time, these secondary applications, the prompts are very specific about the word count for the response. And usually you can expect somewhere like 2 to 3 paragraphs, half of a type page. Somewhere in there is kind of where most of these responses land. There's definitely the extremes where there's some that are allowed 2 sentences and there's some that are allowed a page and a half, but most of them are going to fall in a few paragraphs. So I think you need to be pretty specific here and then just choose, 2 or 3 things that really interest you in the school and talk about those. You don't need to just put like a sentence for every type of thing that possibly interests you. I like public health. I like the school's resources. I like this. Like, no, pick a couple things that you really identify with and expand on those in that space that you have. And going on to talk about a little bit about like this, do you have any comments that you wish to share that's not included in your primary application? I'm going to move to the next slide because I think it goes along really well with the next slide of don't use your secondaries. The next slide. You don't want to use your secondaries to just go and rattle off extraneous information. So I see really a lot of students do this where they feel like, oh, there's a prompt. I don't have anything to add right here. I better write something. And so they end up either repeating exactly what was in their primary application, or they just write something that doesn't really fit with the prompt. And I think that is looked very poorly on. The way I see it, and Dr. Katzen, let me know if you agree, is that admissions committees are reviewing thousands of applications. At the point that they're reading your secondary application, they've already reviewed your primary application, which is like 15 pages. They've reviewed a ton about you. They've already read a ton about you. They don't want to go and read these essay questions if there's nothing new for them to learn about you. I think it's a waste of their time, and they will not want to entertain it and just read it if it's just the same exact information or it doesn't apply. So don't waste your time or their time just putting information that doesn't matter or doesn't apply to the prompt. Dr. Katzen, would you agree with me there?
Totally. And just to sort of add on to what Dr. Marinelli said, quality is much more important than quantity. Don't feel obligated to fill out the 1,000 characters or whatever, or the word count. Make your essays to the point, write them well, and don't worry about the rest of the space just to fill it up, because the more you try to do that, the less coherent the essay is. I'd rather read 500, 750 words than 2,000 if the last 1,500 really is just filler. And like Dr. Marinelli said, the committees are very busy, have a tremendous workload. And if they read something that they think was just filling space and not really adding anything, it really is looked upon negatively that you're wasting the time. So don't fear not filling the entire box. Think more of the quality of what you say and be concise and to the point. Just one other thing I would add for those of you who are working independently, use your word processor. Make sure your spelling and your grammar is right. Those are things that are looked upon if you don't spell words correctly, you don't punctuate correctly. They're looked upon as careless. You didn't really care enough about either your primary or secondary application to take the time to make sure it was as good as you could make it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And, one of the other things here too is reusing a different essay for a prompt that doesn't fit. And so basically, somebody could kind of like, oh, I'll take this challenge essay and put it for this one that's like diversity. And I've seen that happen over and over again. And it's very obvious to the reader that you are just reusing a prompt from another school to put into this one. And just don't do that. It's really great to recycle them and to reuse them if they fit. Absolutely, that's wonderful. But if they don't fit, don't force it to fit. And the other thing about recycling essays, and I've seen this happen, and it's tragic when it happens, is somebody can actually forget to rename the school. Dr. Katzen, I think you've seen this with editing, is like, they're reusing a prompt for George Washington and they put, Georgetown. They they keep George Washington in there and then they send it to Georgetown or whatever. I've seen that happen. And that is like an absolute, ooh, that school is probably not going to move forward with your application if they know you sent the wrong prompt. So just be mindful of those types of things as you're moving through them. You want to move through them fast. You want to do a good job. And you really want to make sure that they're correct and free of mistakes, like Dr. Katzen said. Going back to this slide was what to use your secondaries for is really to show your interest in that school. Why do you want to go to that particular school? At this point, you've maybe applied to 30 schools and they really want to know, has this person done their research? Why would we accept them? Why would they want to come over here to Minnesota or New York or any of these types of places? And really making sure that you're convincing them that you would be an ideal applicant for their school. And then talk about any things that wasn't included in your application, if that applies. So again, as we said before, you may not have substance for a particular prompt, or it may be relatively short, and that's okay. But let's say you started a new extracurricular activity since submitting your AMCAS application, or some new grades came out, you completed some courses. Those are all relevant information to put into your secondary application. Let's move on here. So Dr. Katzen, I will let you speak real quick about kind of these other assessments, because these sneak up on students. And so I kind of lump these other assessments into like the secondary part of the application, because this is really the time when students need to be thinking about Casper and the preview test. So I'll let you speak to what these are for a moment.
So the tests that Dr. Marinelli is projecting now are known as the situational judgment tests. And first, I'll make a brief comment about them and give you an idea about the schools that are requiring them. So the Altus suite of situational judgment tests includes 3 separate ones: the Casper, the snapshot, and the duet. The Casper is a test that's been around about 10 years. It's been progressively used by more and more of the medical schools over the last several years, to the point that if you are applying to 20 or more schools, it's almost certain at least one of them or more are going to require the Casper. The Casper is a combination of written responses and video responses. One quick word to the wise is they are timed. And once it flips to the next scenario, you can't go back. So you have to watch your timing. In general, a quick comment about anytime you're doing a video interview or you're recording anything, I would say be professional. Don't be in the middle of a coffee shop with people talking, have your dog barking in the background. And I think you should dress at least to the point that they can see you in a professional manner. The Casper is really testing a handful, about 4 primary judgmental things, such as the concept of autonomy, the concept of malfeasance, justice, and beneficence. The snapshot is really very brief, and by the way, the Casper takes about 90 to 100, 120 minutes, I think, to complete in total. The other thing about the Casper is that at the end of it, they give you the opportunity to sign up for the snapshot within 10 days. And I would recommend that you do that, because our experience, at least last year, is for the people that didn't sign up at the end of the Casper, they weren't always able to then sign up for the snapshot, even though the snapshot is not, at least as of last year, required by as many schools. The snapshot is totally recorded. It's only 10 to 15 minutes. It is usually 3 questions that are more, the questions that they ask are more like the questions you might be asked in a traditional one-on-one interview. Why do you want to be a doctor? Tell me about a challenge you faced. Tell me about yourself. Those type of questions. The duet is an interesting test. It's sort of a matching test. Do your responses match school A, school B? And there's a ranking that goes on through pretty much each question, each section of the duet. The one thing I would say is when you take the duet, be honest. In other words, if they're asking you to rank something and you're applying to a school that you think is heavy duty in research and your application doesn't support that, you don't have a lot of research, or you don't have either in your secondary or your activities or your personal statement, don't try to force it, because they're going to look at your application, and if it doesn't fit, it will be things like, are you interested in rural medicine? Are you interested, a ranking situation to do. The preview is new this year. In the past, this is AAMC's own situational judgment test. In the past year or two, they did the VITA, which has now been replaced. That's no longer there. And this is AAMC's version of a situational judgment test. Again, I think the preparation for this is very similar to what you might want to prepare for a standard one-on-one interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Katzen. I know it's a lot to explain. And I feel like each year where these tests are just adding up, and they really are. I mean, Snapshot and Duet, I believe, were new last year. Casper has changed where now they've added the video responses. And as Dr. Katzen said, the AMC preview has kind of been a reiteration of the VITA, and now more schools are asking for it. So it's just another hoop to jump through. This is not the MCAT. You don't need to spend months preparing for this, but what you do really want to do is read through the information about it. Med School Coach has some great resources for it as well, and familiarize yourself with the test, practice taking the test, especially typing out your answers before you actually do it. So just something I really wanted to throw out there to kind of give everybody a idea of what these tests are and what to really start thinking about, because this is really the time that you want to get these done. And just a reminder out there, if you have questions, please try to type them in the Q&A, just because it's a little bit easier for me to monitor that one instead of both the chat and the Q&A. And then I'll try to answer as many questions as we can. And hopefully we can get to those pretty shortly. So I know there's a lot of great questions out there. So what happens after the secondaries? And this is, a full webinar by itself, but I wanted to touch on it briefly tonight so everybody can kind of get some anticipatory guidance on what to expect after you hit submit on those secondaries. So again, just to kind of go over that timeline, because I did get a couple questions about this. So you submit your primary. Hopefully you've done that already. If you haven't, you'll do that soon. For AMCAS, schools will start receiving that primary June 25th, and then you're going to get started with the secondaries and get a flood of secondaries. We recommend returning them. I think the ideal timeline is 1 to 2 weeks. Sooner the better. I mean, if you were just on it and you prepared your secondaries to a T and you have it just ready to go, I probably wouldn't turn it around in like an hour after receipt. Maybe, hold it for a day or two so it actually looks like you've put the effort and time into it. So, but if you're preparing them and actively getting them ready, I think ideally 1 to 2 weeks, max about 2 to 3. Some schools have specific deadlines for the secondaries too. I wouldn't try to push to that deadline. Try to get it in earlier to show that interest. And then once you get that secondary in, your application, if you have everything else, like you've had your Casper done, if you have all your letters of recommendation received by that school, when they get that secondary, your application is going to be considered complete there. And then they're going to really start a more in-depth review and review you for a possible interview, which is kind of the, the next ultimate goal here. And so what you really want to do is make sure that those are in early as soon as possible, because if you hadn't joined any of our other webinars, most schools use rolling admissions, meaning that they are going to review those complete applicants as they come in and start offering interviews to those applicants that are complete. The earlier, the better, and the more likely you'll get offered an interview early on. Don't be too worried if you don't receive interviews in August. or September. It is a long process. It can take a month, it can take a couple months before you hear from schools after receiving those secondaries. It can even take a little while before you get that secondary request. But usually, shortly after that submission of the primaries, when these secondaries are going to start rolling in. And I'm going to launch a quick poll real quick here, and it's just going to be a quick one. I think it's just kind of interesting, is how important is the medical school interview? All right, I'm going to end that here and show everybody this is pretty fair. I think 87% of the people say very important. And so I completely agree here. I think the interview is so important. I mean, all of the aspects of your application are important, but I really feel the interview is probably like one of those initial last steps that are kind of the make or break. And again, we can spend a whole nother hour, and we will eventually when we get closer to that time this year, talking about interviews and how to prepare for interviews, but it is so important. I've heard schools quote somewhere between 25 to 50% of the students that get an interview at their school get accepted to the school. Whereas, with just a primary application, if you submit a primary, maybe 1% of the people that submit primaries get an acceptance, maybe even less than that at some schools. But they only select a group of people, small group of people to complete the interviews. And so, if you're at that point, you have a very, very good chance of getting accepted, but also a really good chance of getting rejected too. So you definitely want to land in that former pile there. Dr. Katzen, any other thoughts on interviews just briefly? I know we're not going there tonight, but just closing thoughts for them.
Sure, just a couple of quick things. Primarily, there are two, and I'll say 2.5 type of interview styles. One is the traditional one-on-one style where it's you, and usually it's one admissions officer, professor, and frequently a student as well. Just very importantly, be careful with the student, although you can speak maybe more age appropriately with them than the professor. You never want to say anything negative. Hey, I hear anatomy really stinks here, that type of thing, because just like you will be a year from now, you're going to be very proud to be there and be at that school, and nobody wants to hear something negative. And I've seen students make that error because of what they've had. The traditional one-on-one, as I said before, is somewhat similar to the snapshot questions. The other type of interview is the MMI, or multiple mini interview, which is a little bit of judgment, situational judgment. Sometimes we give you something that seem to be medical cases. We're not really expecting you to know the medicine, but we're expecting you to know some basic judgments and things that you should or shouldn't do. And we sort of covered it by engaging you in a medical scenario. The third type, just to bring up, is what I'm going to call the group interview. It's not a different type of question usually. It's usually very similar to the one-on-one questions. A lot of times they'll be talking about societal issues and whatnot. And one of the things maybe a little bit harder on the Zoom and Skype world that we're in than in person is politeness is important. And that's one of the things that's being tested is, how do you work in a team? Can you handle it if someone else is always yelling out the answer just to be first? Are you still able to add constructively to it and politely? And even if you disagree, can you disagree in a way that shows you've got a pleasant demeanor? So don't necessarily feel you have to be the first one to yell and scream out an answer. Your personality, your demeanor are really, in my opinion, see what Dr. Marinelli says, but I think in the group interviews, I think we're really testing more your ability to work in a team, your ability, your personality, more so than your factual knowledge. We just want to see how you react in a group, and and particularly in a group that's intimidating, people that are as smart as you.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, they're really trying to see, how is this person going to be with their peers in medical school? How are they going to be when they become a physician, or they're in medical school and they're interacting with their colleagues, attending physicians, junior physicians, patients? So they want to just see those basic interaction skills. And if you can't show them that through this initial stage, it's going to look very, very poorly. So I agree. I mean, that's just so important. It seems kind of common sense, but it just sometimes is not common sense for people. So I think it's a great reminder. Let's finish up here with the presentation, and then we will get to the Q&A. And so hopefully please continue to drop some questions in there. But just a quick plug about Med School Coach. So we've been around for over 10 years. We've helped thousands of applicants apply and get into medical school. And Dr. Katzen and myself continue to work with applicants and help them through their application. And so we are just really, excited to work with people and want to work with you. So check us out. We have some great packages online. Definitely, we help a lot with just putting together the whole package, excuse me, the whole application from start to finish. If you're past that, we help with secondary applications, and we help with interview prep as well. And so anybody that signs up tonight, that receipt that is on this webinar, then you can receive a free interview prep session with your gold package. So I'm going to drop a couple cool links here, and then I want to put in just one poll too. One thing is we do free enrollment consultations. So if you are interested in getting started with us, having the enrollment conversation with us is a great way to get started. So, if you're interested in this, just please drop, your response in the poll, and we can reach out to you to get this scheduled. And again, we'll work with you through wherever you're at in the application. If you are getting ready to submit that primary application still, we're good. We'll get you going. If you are at secondaries, perfect. Let's get you going there. But we're definitely available for you. So let me put that that link too as well for our application packages. And then let's get started with the Q&A, because I think that is just so helpful for everybody, and hopefully we can try to get to as many questions as possible here. So let me move these controls over. I've got 8,000 windows open. Dr. Katzen, I wanted you to tackle this one. I've actually seen this question a couple times, and this is an iteration of the question, but basically, what if I know I wanted to apply to a specific school? Is it okay if I apply to less than 10 schools or 10 to 15 schools?
So one of the things that I like to point out about applying to medical school is, in my opinion, there are no safety schools. When you apply, many of you, when you applied from high school to college, there were clearly some safety schools. You had a great grade point average, great SATs. In medical school, there are about 75,000 applicants for 23,000 positions. The wider exposure, the greater the net you cast, the more chance you have of being accepted. In general, even for very strong students with great credentials, I rarely would recommend less than 20, 25 schools. I just think that the odds are so small. On a basis of the schools I've been involved with, I mean, the smaller number is 10,000. I've seen up to 18,000 applicants, and most schools are accepting somewhere between 150 to 200 applicants. So to me, that means by definition, many very qualified students are not being accepted just due to the numbers. So I would give yourself the advantage of applying really no less than 20 and ideally 25. Sort of an addendum to that, a rule of thumb, maybe the weaker an applicant, the higher the denominator should be. I think you have to be careful. Not to just limit gee, I want to go to this school and I'm only going to apply here and 3 more. I think that's a very dangerous way to approach the number of applications.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, one other just quick thing to say about that is I've seen also people kind of go to the opposite side where it's like, okay, fine, I'm going to apply to, all 160 plus US MD schools. And you can certainly do that on your primary application. It's going to cost you probably a few $1,000s, but once you get to those secondary applications, it will be near impossible to complete all those secondary applications for all of those schools. I usually find students are pretty maxed out with secondaries. Around 40 to 50 schools is kind of like the absolute top you can apply to. So you really, like Dr. Katzen said, you have to use a lot of discretion and a lot of judgment about which schools to apply to. You can't just apply across the board, and you can't just apply to only 10 or 15 because it's not going to give you the best chance. Even the top applicants are not always going to get in. So you really, really have to be selective with the schools and use a lot of strategy about where you're most competitive and where you're going to be most likely to get in. I'm going to answer a question here is, how much information on these secondaries should I share about myself? And is there something like, could I share something that could potentially hurt me, or, I'm being too open? And I get this question a lot. And so my recommendation is anything you share on your primary or your secondary application, it's kind of put out there and open for discussion. And so one, if the admissions committee is going to know about it, and two, you kind of have to be prepared to talk about it if you have a potential interview. And so if you don't want the admissions committee to know about something, or you don't want to talk about it during an interview, then it's not appropriate to mention on these applications. And things like that are kind of like, I've seen a lot of applicants with depression or anxiety, or maybe they're part of a specific, community that they don't want to talk about, or they feel it's important to them, but maybe they don't want to talk about it beyond their secondary application. I feel kind of anything you include there is kind of subject to discussion and further kind of knowledge gaining for the admissions committee. So I don't recommend doing it if it's relevant and you want to include it, or it's a very important part of your life, or maybe it was a really significant thing you overcame or you are overcoming, then you can. I would leave the description of it brief and really focus on how you've overcome it and what you've learned and how you've grown from it. Dr. Katzen, this is a great question, and one we get a ton of times is, okay, what about if I'm a reapplicant? How do I prepare those secondaries now? Am I using the same answers? If those prompts don't change year from year, can I use my same answers?
Okay, so if the prompt or the essay question is really about your activities, things you've done, they haven't changed. Ideally, you have some new ones to talk about, or the ones that you've been involved in, you're either more involved, you have something more to talk about. I mean, rule of thumb, you don't want to copy and paste what you did last year, even if it's something that's very significant that's no longer ongoing, like a prior research project or a very meaningful community service activity. I would try to at least rephrase it, because we do, one of the things that we do in reapplicants, and I'd like to make a point with that, schools don't necessarily look down upon a reapplicant, but we do look, did you take the time to either improve what was the reason that we didn't accept you last year, and did you take the time to take the reapplication seriously? In other words, put the effort into it, rewrite it. I mean, if you were doing a specific project or whatnot, and you want to talk about that again, that's fine. But ideally, that you have something more, something different that you've learned this year, or other skills that you've learned this year than you did last year. So the simple question is no, don't copy and paste it.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. A few questions here about like Casper and snapshot and preview. So I'll try to kind of group this all together. So I dropped a couple links about Casper and snapshot and stuff in the chat. So definitely check those out so you can learn a little bit more about them. But basically, if you sign up for Casper, then you are able to take snapshot and duet. I believe it's within 14 days now. I think it was 10 last year. Now I think it's 14 days you're able to take snapshot and duet. Not every school that requires Casper requires Snapshot or Duet. But if you have one school on your list that either requires Snapshot or Duet, you get a one-time shot to take it in an application cycle. So my recommendation is just to take it, because it's just easier to kind of have it done. If the schools require it and want it, then it's there. If it's not, if no one requires it, who cares? You wasted a few hours of your life, you took it, it's done. But if you have even just one school that requires Snapshot and Duet, and you don't take it within those 14 days of after Casper, then you do not get the chance to retake it this application cycle. So it's kind of just this one-time shot to get it done. And so I recommend just getting it done. There's another question about if Casper can replace AMC Preview, and that depends. So you have to look on the AMC Preview website, and they have a really good list of information about which schools actually require the AMC exam, and if schools will accept Casper instead of Preview. So I just pasted the link in the chat. So check that out. They've got a ton of materials for preparation. They have like a practice exam, and then they have a chart that has the listing of the schools that are requiring it or recommending it. And it will say on there if Casper can actually release, or excuse me, not release, suffice for the preview. Let's see. Let me find a question. Dr. Katzen, can you talk a little bit about this one? I know when we had our webinar a couple weeks ago, we talked about this a lot, but what about people that are still waiting for their MCAT score and they haven't added applications to their, or excuse me, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. Sometimes it works beautifully, sometimes it doesn't, as you can tell. What about those people that are waiting for their MCAT score? Maybe they've submitted their MCAS application, but they haven't added a ton of schools yet. Talk a little bit about that strategy there.
Okay, so one of the things that we like to point out is that getting the primary application in, getting it verified as early as possible is crucial. Because if you put it in, I think May 26th this year, the odds of getting it verified probably within 5 to 10 days are pretty good. If you're a month late just submitting your primary application, it could take 6 to 8 weeks to get verified. You can submit the application with only one school, and that will start the verification process. And ideally, if the MCAT comes back and the MCAT is very positive or even not as positive as you want, you can then add other schools based on how you feel your competitiveness will be. So we strongly recommend getting the primary in as soon as possible, even if you're only going to do one school. In general, you're probably able, even at the beginning before the MCAT, to think of more than one, particularly if you have states, you're in a state that has several state schools. Applying to in-state schools is usually a pretty good thing to do. A little bit of preference. You can, in the Explorer, which I think Dr. Marinelli referenced before, one of the pieces of valuable information is the amount of in-state and also the number of out-of-state acceptances that they would render. You know, for some of the Texas, some of the California schools, if they're only going to accept 12, 14% of total out of state, and that is not your state of residence, that may not be the best place for you to apply. Nothing about your credentials, just you're not an in-state resident in a state-supported public school. But definitely get the primary in with a minimum of one school. That great MCAT comes back in 4 weeks, then you can be much more liberal in adding additional schools. Some of the schools, and Dr. Marinelli will add to this, will accept secondaries up to October, even late November. The deadlines pretty much tail off right around then. But, you know, if there are others deadlines, please correct me.
Yeah, well, there are other deadlines, but it's funny, I get asked about deadlines for schools every year, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't pay attention to the deadline because you should never be submitting your stuff close to the deadlines. You always want to be earlier because of what we talked about earlier, that rolling admissions, they're reviewing people as they come in. And so you don't want to be the last stack that they get at the end of October, right before their deadline in October 31st. You're going to have a really hard time moving forward with that school. So to me, the deadlines are almost irrelevant. And like you said, Dr. Katzen, like you need to get it in before that. But those ones, if you're that late in the cycle, you probably want to be thinking about not even continuing with your application and really applying next year early right away. Question here that I've seen is, and I get this a lot, and I think it's a great question because I think students struggle with this is, what diversity would you add to this class is usually kind of how the typical question is. I know Dr. Katzen talked about it a bit earlier, but I wanted just to add to this, I think we kind of all think about diversity in ethnicity or, your family background, but not everybody is ethnically diverse. And that's okay. And you don't have to only be ethnically diverse. There's other areas of diversity. And I really think about diversity of life experiences, diversity of your upbringing, diversity of your schooling, diversity in how you had to maybe finance college or maybe commute to college. I mean, there's lots of different areas of diversity that you can think about. I think about lots of people, even in diversity of their experiences. Maybe they didn't grow up with a mom and dad that were doctors. Maybe they were, first-time college students, or maybe their parents, were never even went to college and they're navigating this whole system by themselves and they were in something completely unrelated to medicine. And so this person is just kind of setting off on that path completely on their own. I think about diversity of kind of travel and different life experiences. Maybe you did a lot of work with global medical brigades in undergrad. Maybe you did missionary work as a kid. There's a lot of different areas of diversity that are applicable to applying to medical school that are not just ethnic diversity. So think about that. What makes you unique? What makes you stand out? How is your kind of unique perspective on life or your life experiences that you gain going to contribute to a medical school? Dr. Katzen, can you think of any other examples off the top of your head that you've seen some students talk about?
Yeah, just sort of along the theme that Dr. Marinelli was talking about, every diversity doesn't have to be a negative. I'm from an underserved community, et cetera. Some diversity could be, as Dr. Marinelli was saying, some of your experiences. You're an athlete. You have taught judo or karate or things of that nature. You've coached little kids. And maybe you've learned to deal with people from, different walks of life, different abilities, those types of things. That's I think, just as critical as, being saying, you're this color, you're this ethnicity, you speak this language. Obviously those count, they're important. Sometimes the diversity will come from your experiences. For example, working at hospice, the type of people that you have learned to deal with. It's the experience of the diversity, not necessarily the personal diversity, is the way that I would look at it. And how did you react to it? And I think it was very well worded by Dr. Marinelli. How did you grow from it? What did you learn from it? That's really what we want to see, whether it's you were the one that suffered or challenged, or you dealt with someone else in that situation. You learned to deal with an autistic child. You worked with kids who were in Special Olympics. You dealt in hospice with grieving families. Those are experiences that show you've seen another side than just the bright side of life that maybe you have, and that's obviously nothing to be ashamed of, but to show that you were able to handle something maybe a little different. I think that's all important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that. I think there's just so much. And I'm just gonna say, if anybody caught our beginning of our conversation, and then Dr. Katzen just mentioned it, diversity is being an athlete or something. If you can see my Spartan medal in the background, I completed a Spartan race yesterday. Super fun. I strongly recommend it to everybody. It will challenge you like crazy. But anyways, just a fun little tidbit there. What a super
And look at her,
experience.
look at her, no obvious injuries from it either.
Yeah, you can't see my legs there. I can't move. No, I'm just kidding. I'm pretty bruised up on the legs and I got some good blisters, but that's okay. Like I've lived to tell the tale. It was lots of fun. So we have a few more minutes remaining. I know we can't get to everybody's questions, but I put a ton of links in the chat. So check those out. I think get you a lot of information there. The other thing too, we really try to provide these free webinars to everybody to get information out there. I know when I was applying to medical school, it was so hard to find information and good information and reliable information. Student Doctor Network, as everybody knows, is great, but it can also be just a rabbit hole of information. So, we want to provide this information from people that have been through it, like Dr. Katzen and myself, and then also been on the other side of it, where we're reviewing tons of applications and have been on admissions committees. So, for us to keep providing these webinars, we'd love for you, if you're liking this tonight, I just dropped a link to click and do a quick Google review. We'd love for you to leave us a Google review. It's super helpful. And we want to keep just helping you guys on this path. We'll try to get to just a couple more questions here for the next few minutes that we have remaining. But one person asked, and I think this is a great question, is I've heard that you shouldn't mention location as a reason for choosing a school or talking about why I want to go to this school on the secondary. And is that true? And I absolutely think, no, that's not true. I mean, if you only talked about the location, like let's say you want to go to UCSD in San Diego and you're just saying, I love San Diego. It's beautiful there. I can't wait to go to the beaches and the weather's going to be nice. And I know that the UCSD is right by the ocean and it would be wonderful to go surfing after school. If that was the entirety of your secondary application, that would be frowned upon. But if you said, something to the extent of, I really look forward to going to medical school at UCSD where I have family and I could be close to family and have a support system. Also, I recognize the opportunities in the area are great. In addition, I really like the UCSD's research and the faculty, and you can mention some other relevant things about the school. I think that's absolutely fine to mention location. I think location is a huge reason people want to go to certain schools. So I think it's fine, but you have to do it in the appropriate context, right? So that's, just a quick answer there. Another thing too that we've seen this question a lot is if you'll get an interview recording. You absolutely will. We'll send you a recording probably tomorrow and some other resources too. Dr. Katzen, let's finish it off with this question. I like this question, is how do you have any tips on addressing any kind of weak areas in the application or using the secondary to kind of, expand on some maybe weak areas?
So my feeling with the weak area is ideally you can show your recognition, admitted, and show growth. How did you deal with what was weak? I got a bad grade in freshman chemistry, but I changed my study habits and was able to do better in the higher level courses. Just a sort of an aside, a general tip is I don't usually recommend attracting unnecessary negative attention. If they didn't ask you specifically, you don't have to tell them you got a lower grade in a course. But on the other hand, if the question is being asked, always try to show your growth and that you came out positive on the other side of it. Although I didn't do well in organic, I changed my study habits and I was able to do well in biochem. That type of thing. I think that approach really is better. And that's sort of a similar comment if you had an institutional action. I know that wasn't questioned, but always try to show you admit it Don't make an excuse, and show your growth from it. And what have you done about it since that time, be it an institutional action or a negative academic grade?
Mhm. Absolutely. Totally agree. Everyone, it's at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. for you on the Eastern Coast. I'm in Colorado. I'm getting hungry for dinner. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. It's such a pleasure for us to be able to talk to you and give you some hopefully very helpful advice. Check out the links I dropped in the chat and be sure to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're here to help you. We know this journey is difficult, so we wish everybody the best. Dr. Katzen, always a pleasure.
Thank you, and always a pleasure to work with Dr. Marinelli, the expert, and we hope to see all of you as colleagues in the next 4 years.
Yep. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good evening.